Sandra Collette pressed the phone to her ear while trying to start her old Ford. It had been an unusually hard day even before the call. It was pouring down like a bucket of rain, drenching the streets of Fayetteville, turning the asphalt into a mirror reflecting the gray, bleak sky. "Collette here," she said, finally starting the car. "Detective, we have a homicide in the Haven Hills neighborhood." The dispatcher's voice sounded tense. "The address is 17 Cedar Street. According to the first report, a husband shot his wife." "On my way," Sandra replied briefly, turning on the siren. Haven Hills was one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the city. It was home to wealthy people who could afford large homes with manicured lawns and backyard pools. Crime was rare there, and it was mostly theft or vandalism committed by teenagers. A murder in such a place always drew more attention from the press and the brass, which meant added pressure on the investigation. The Mitchell family home stood out even among the other mansions in the neighborhood. The two-story colonial-style structure with white columns and perfectly manicured grounds around it seemed like the epitome of the American dream. Now that image was being disturbed by police cars with flashing blue and red lights, yellow crime scene tape, and a few gawkers gathered in the distance despite the rain. Sandra parked the car and, pulling the hood of her raincoat over her head, headed toward the house. She was met by a young officer nervously rubbing a notepad. "Detective Collette?" "Officer Parker, I was first on the scene. Call came in at 15:30 from a neighbor who heard a gunshot. There are 3 people inside. The body of a young woman, her father-in-law, who confessed to the murder, and her mother-in-law. We didn't touch them. We were waiting for you. The victim's husband? He's not back yet. We're trying to find him." Sandra nodded and, putting on boots and gloves, stepped over the threshold of the house. The inside was as luxurious as the outside. Marble floor in the hallway, crystal chandelier, antique furniture. All this created a contrast to the scene. 2 patrolmen stood against the wall, watching a middle-aged man sitting in an armchair. A woman, about the same age, stood by the window with her arms wrapped around herself. But Sandra's attention was immediately drawn to the body of a young woman lying on the living room floor. Blood from a wound on her chest spread across the white carpet, forming a dark stain. "Thomas Mitchell?" Sandra addressed the man in the chair. The man raised his head. His eyes were red but dry. He didn't look so much upset as devastated. "Yes, it's me," he answered in a muffled voice. "Detective Sandra Collette, do you understand what happened?" "I shot my sister-in-law, Amelia Mitchell," Thomas answered in a flat tone, as if he were reporting the weather. "The gun is on the table. I didn't touch it after the shot." Sandra looked at the coffee table, where the gun, already marked with an expert number, was lying. "Do you understand that you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney?" "I do. I won't deny that I did it. But I don't want a lawyer yet." "Can you explain why you did it?" Thomas looked away, his jaw clenched. "No, Nuptu, not now." Sandra looked at the woman at the window. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The woman flinched as if snapped out of a trance. "Vivian Mitchell," she introduced herself. Her voice trembled, but her eyes remained as dry as her husband's. "I was upstairs when I heard the shot. I came down and—" She waved her hand in the direction of the body. "Did you call the police?" "No, a neighbor did. He heard the gunshot and came by to check. Thomas was just sitting in the chair and I was in shock." Sandra made a few notes in her notebook and then walked over to the body. The young woman, Amelia, was lying on her back, her eyes open and staring at the ceiling. A single bullet to the heart. Death was instantaneous. She was wearing a simple blue dress, her hair neatly styled. There was nothing to suggest she was preparing for conflict or expecting an attack. The medical examiner, Dr. Ramirez, entered the room, nodded to Sandra, and proceeded to examine the body. "Time of death was sometime between 15 and 15:30, he said after the initial examination. "The cause of death is obvious, a gunshot wound to the heart area. The distance of the gunshot is no more than 2 meters, judging from the burns around the entry wound." Sandra nodded and turned back to Thomas. "Minus Mr. Mitchell, is the gun registered to you?" "Yes, I bought it 5 years ago for self-defense. I keep it in a safe in my office." "Did you plan the murder in advance?" "No." Thomas shook his head. "It happened. Spontaneous." "What exactly happened? Was there a conflict?" A fight? Thomas shook his head and fell silent, clearly not wanting to continue the conversation. Sandra decided not to press for now. She would have time to question him at the station. At that moment, the front door rattled open, and a young man, wet from the rain, burst into the house. He was stopped by an officer, but he resisted desperately. "Let me in! This is my house! What's going on here?" Sandra nodded to the officer, and he let the young man go. He burst into the living room and froze when he saw the body on the floor. "Amelia?" he whispered, unable to believe his eyes. "Amelia!" He rushed toward the body, but Sandra intercepted him. "Are you John Mitchell?" "Yes, I'm her husband." He tried to break free. "What happened? Who did this?" His eyes darted around the room and stopped at his father sitting in the chair. "Dad? What are you—" His eyes widened with horror and understanding. No, not you. Tell me it's not you." Thomas didn't answer, only lowered his head further. John rushed towards him, but two officers grabbed his arms. "Why?" he screamed, trying to break free. "Why did you kill her? What did she do to you?" "John, calm down," Vivian said quietly as she approached her son. "Please." "Mom?" John looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. "Do you know why? Tell me." Vivian shook her head, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, I don't know, son." Sandra signaled the officers to take John to another room. They needed to separate the family members to interview each one separately. She followed them into the kitchen, leaving Thomas in the care of a patrolman. John sat at the table, wrapping his arms around his head. His shoulders were shaking, but he wasn't crying. It seemed the shock was too strong for tears. "Minus Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry," Sandra began, sitting down across from him. "But I need to ask you some questions." John looked up at her with reddened eyes. "I don't understand. Why did my father do this? He and Amelia had always gotten along well. Never any fights. Nothing. When was the last time you saw your wife?" "This morning, before work. She was going to the gallery where she works. She was working. It was business as usual. We had breakfast together, talked about weekend plans." His voice trailed off. "We wanted to go to the lake." "You live with your parents?" "Yes, temporarily. Amelia and I are saving for a house of our own. I work for my father's company, and we were comfortable living here until we found something suitable." "How long have you been married?" 2 years. We met in college, dated for a year, then got married." "Did your wife have any conflicts with any family members?" John shook his head. "No, never. Amelia tried very hard to make everyone like her. She spent a lot of time with her mom. They often went shopping together, to the spa, to yoga. They became very close." "And with your father?" "Dad was always a little distant, but he was good to Amelia. I never noticed any tension between them." "Was your father supposed to be at work today?" "Yeah, he's usually in the office till 7 p.m. I don't know why he came home so early." "And your mother?" "She does housework, sometimes she volunteers. She's usually home during the day." Sandra took some more notes. "Did your wife have access to the safe where the gun was kept?" John looked at her in surprise. "No, only my father. He was always very strict about guns." "Did your wife ever express fear of any of the family members?" "No, never. We were happy here." He covered his face with his hands. "At least I thought so." Sandra let him calm down a little and then continued. "I need to know where you were between 2 and 4 o'clock this afternoon." "At work, at the company office. There were a lot of people there. They can confirm. I only got out of there after a call from a neighbor who said the police were at our house." "Okay, thank you. Stay here for now. I'll get back to you later." Sandra walked out of the kitchen and back into the living room. Amelia's body had already been bagged and was being prepared for transportation to the morgue. Thomas Mitchell was still sitting in the chair, now handcuffed. 2 officers stood nearby, ready to escort him to the station. "Minus Mr. Mitchell, you're going to the police station for formal questioning. Once again, I remind you of your right to an attorney." Thomas nodded and stood up. As he was being led out, he cast a long look at his wife standing by the fireplace. Vivian turned away, not meeting his eyes. Sandra approached Vivian after Thomas was taken away. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you some questions in private." They walked to a small room that served as a library. Vivian sat on the edge of the couch with her hands folded in her lap. She looked collected and calm, which Sandra noted as odd for someone who had just lost a family member to a violent death. "Tell me what happened today." Sandra asked. I was home all day, Vivian began. Amelia was supposed to be at the gallery. Thomas is usually at work until the evening. Around 3 o'clock I heard the front door open, but I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe Amelia had come home early. I was upstairs in the bedroom folding laundry. Then I heard voices downstairs, then a scream, and then a gunshot. I ran out of the room and downstairs. Amelia was lying on the floor. Thomas was sitting in a chair with a gun in his hand. He put it on the table when he saw me. What did he say? He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and then he turned away. I ran over to Amelia, but she wasn't breathing. Then the neighbor who heard the gunshot came running and called the police. Do you know why your husband shot his sister-in-law? Vivian shook her head, but Sandra saw her hands clench into fists for a moment. No, I don't. There was never any conflict between them. How would you describe Amelia's relationship with your son? They loved each other. Vivian said it too quickly, as if it were a memorized phrase. John always wanted a big family, children. Amelia, too, wanted that too. Sandra noted the slight pause before the last phrase. And how was your relationship with Amelia? Good, Vivian answered again too quickly. She was a nice girl. We spent a lot of time together. Were you close? Vivian looked away. Yes, you could say that, like mother and daughter. Something in the intonation of that phrase made Sandra wary. She decided to go the other way. Your husband was supposed to be at work today. Do you know why he came home earlier than usual? No, he didn't tell me. Have you spoken to him since the incident? Nunab too. He just sat in his chair and didn't say anything. Mrs. Mitchell, do you find your husband's behavior strange? A man who has lived with you for over 20 years suddenly kills your sister-in-law for no apparent reason and refuses to explain it. Vivian looked away, her hands nervously fumbling with the hem of her blouse. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It all seems like a nightmare. Are you aware of any problems in your family? Maybe financial difficulties, cheating, hidden conflicts? No, nothing like that, Vivian answered too quickly. We were fine. Sandra watched the woman's reaction carefully. Something was definitely not adding up in this story. Vivian was clearly hiding something, and Thomas refused to talk about her motives. Meanwhile, the young woman lay dead, and her husband was heartbroken. Last question for today, Mrs. Mitchell. Where were you between 2 and 3 this afternoon? I told you at home, Vivian said, irritation in her voice. I was folding laundry in the bedroom. Can anyone confirm that? No, I was alone. The housekeeper comes on Mondays and Thursdays. Today's Tuesday. I see, that's all. But I may have to ask you more questions later. Please don't leave town without informing the police. Sandra left the library and headed towards the experts who were still working in the living room. Something about Vivian's demeanor made her feel that the woman knew a lot more than she was saying. Her reaction to her sister-in-law's death had been too restrained, almost detached. There had been no tears, no hysteria, not even outright shock. More like relief or fear of exposure. Detective, one of the experts called out to her. We found the victim's cell phone in her purse. Would you like to see it? Sandra put on a new pair of gloves and picked up the phone. It was unlocked. Apparently forensics had already worked on it. I've looked at the last calls and messages, the expert said. Nothing out of the ordinary. The last call was to the husband around 1 p.m. The conversation lasted less than a minute. The messages are mostly work-related, with co-workers in the gallery. What about other apps? Social networks, messengers? Haven't checked in depth yet, but nothing suspicious at first glance. Sandra nodded and handed the phone back. Pack it up as evidence. I want the digital department to do a full analysis. She paced the living room, trying to visualize what had happened. Thomas Mitchell came home unexpectedly. Why? What made a successful businessman quit his job in the middle of the day? He found Amelia here, who was supposed to be at work. They had an argument, and he shot her. But over what? What could have made him so angry that he would kill his own son's wife? Sandra went to the window and saw John sitting on the porch in the rain, oblivious to the inclement weather. His shoulders were shaking with sobs. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching her son but making no attempt to go over and comfort him. There was more than physical distance separating them. At that moment, Sandra caught Vivian's gaze and noticed something strange in it. Not grief, not shock, but something akin to guilt? Fear? The woman quickly looked away, but Sandra was already certain. Vivian Mitchell knew why her husband had killed his sister-in-law, and that knowledge scared her to death. The Fayetteville police station was buzzing like a beehive. News of a murder in one of the city's most respectable families had spread instantly. Reporters were already gathering at the front door, and Captain Harris called Sandra into his office for a report. "Colette, what have we got?" he asked as the detective closed the door behind her. Thomas Mitchell, age 51, shot and killed his sister-in-law, Amelia Mitchell, age 23. Doesn't deny he did it, but refuses to give a motive. The gun belongs to him, registered. The murder took place at his house around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Witnesses? The suspect's wife, Vivian Mitchell, 48, was home at the time of the murder, but claims she was upstairs and only came down after the shooting. The suspect's son and the victim's husband, John Mitchell, age 25, was at work. His alibi checks out. What are the leads? Sandra thought for a moment. It's not clear yet. No family feuds, no conflicts over inheritance, nothing obvious. A seemingly perfect family. Thomas is a successful businessman, owner of a construction company. Vivian is a housewife, actively involved in charity work. John works in his father's company. Amelia was a curator at an art gallery. All interviewed acquaintances and neighbors claim that they never noticed any problems in the family. Still, a man doesn't kill his son's wife for nothing, the captain remarked. There must be a motive. I'll continue the investigation. Today, we'll get a warrant to access the victim's personal belongings, her computer and phone. Maybe there'll be something there that will shed some light on what happened. All right, keep me posted. And, Colette. The captain lowered his voice. The press has already gotten wind of it. Mitchell family's known around town. It's going to be a high-profile case. No leaks, understood? Yes, sir. Leaving the captain's office, Sandra headed for the interrogation room where Thomas Mitchell was being held. The man sat at the desk, staring at one point. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose. He looked tired and aged. "Minus Mr. Mitchell, are you ready to tell us why you killed your sister-in-law?" Sandra asked, sitting down across from him. Thomas slowly raised his eyes. They were flushed, but dry. "I will exercise my right to an attorney," he said. "I will not answer any questions until he arrives." "If you say so," Sandra nodded. "But you know, sometimes it's better to tell the truth right away. Whatever happened, there's no point in hiding it. We'll find out anyway." "You don't understand," Thomas replied quietly. "Some things are better left buried. This is a murder, Mr. Mitchell. A young woman is dead. Your son has lost his wife. What could be more important than the truth?" "Sometimes the truth is more destructive than a lie," Thomas replied and turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. Sandra left the room, even more intrigued. What could Amelia have done that Thomas would choose to kill her and go to prison but not reveal the truth? In her office, Sandra laid out the crime scene photos and began looking through them, trying to find any clues. Something was escaping her attention, some detail that could explain everything. There was a knock on the door. It was Officer Parker. "Detective, a search warrant for the Mitchells' home and access to the victim's personal effects has arrived." "Great," Sandra stood up. "Let's go." Back at the Mitchell house, Sandra found Vivian in the living room. The woman was sitting on the couch, staring into the void. The blood stain on the carpet was covered by a sheet. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have a warrant to search the house and seize Amelia's personal effects for investigation," Sandra informed her. "Where is her room?" Vivian flinched and looked at the detective with poorly concealed fear. "Upstairs, second door on the right. She and John occupied the guest bedroom." "Where's your son now?" "At the hospital. He had a nervous breakdown and was sedated." Sandra nodded and headed upstairs, accompanied by 2 officers. Amelia and John's room was spacious and bright. A double bed, bookshelves, dressing table. Everything was neat and tasteful. Sandra started by looking through Amelia's personal belongings. In her closet hung dresses and suits, mostly understated but stylish. There were cosmetics on her dressing table and jewelry in a small jewelry box. Nothing out of the ordinary. "Check everything," Sandra commanded the officers. "Look for diaries, letters, any personal records." One of the officers brought in a laptop found in a desk drawer. "Detective, this is the victim's computer." Great, bag it for the digital division. Sandra continued her search and came across a box under the bed. Inside were photo albums, postcards, souvenirs, the usual memorabilia. She started going through them and noticed an envelope hidden between the pages of one of the albums. It contained a photograph of Amelia on the beach. She was in a bikini, smiling for the camera. For your eyes only. Love, A. The handwriting was clearly female, but it could have been Amelia herself giving the gift to her husband. Sandra continued her search and found several more similar photos hidden in different places. All of them were quite intimate, though not overtly erotic, and all with similar captions on the back. "Detective," one of the officers called out. "I found this in the dressing table drawer." He handed Sandra a small, leather-bound notebook. It was a diary. Sandra opened it and began to read. Most of the entries were fairly mundane. Notes about work, weekend plans, shopping lists, but occasionally there were more personal entries. "Jay brought up the kids again today. I don't know how long I can delay this conversation. He doesn't realize I'm not ready. I can't tell him the truth." V was especially gentle today. We spent all day together while the men were at work. Sometimes I think she's the only one I can be my real self with. 3 years now of our secret. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better to tell everything to Jay, but V is afraid it would destroy the family. She's right, but the lies are eating me up inside. As Sandra flipped through the pages, the picture gradually became clearer. Amelia clearly had a secret relationship with someone whose name she labeled with the initials V. And judging from the context, this relationship had been going on for 3 years now. But who was this V? A friend? A co-worker? That's when Vivian walked into the room. "Did you find anything?" she asked in a strained voice. Sandra closed the diary and looked at the woman intently. "Perhaps. Mrs. Mitchell, did you know that Amelia was having some sort of secret relationship?" Vivian turned pale. What do you mean?" "There are hints in her diary about a certain V, with whom she had a close relationship. Do you know anything about that?" "No," Vivian answered too quickly. "I don't know anything about her personal life, except that she was married to my son." "That's strange," Sandra said thoughtfully. "You said you were close to Amelia, spent a lot of time together." We didn't discuss such things." Vivian clasped her fingers together nervously. "Excuse me, I need to lie down. It's been a long day." She hurried out of the room. Sandra stared after her, feeling that she had just gotten an important clue. Vivian was clearly nervous when it came to Amelia's secret relationship, and her name started with a V. "Collect all of Amelia's personal belongings," Sandra ordered the officers, "especially diaries, letters, photographs. I'm going to the station." Back at the police station, Sandra took Amelia's laptop to the digital division. "I need full access to her emails, social media, messengers," she told the technician. "Look for correspondence with Vivian Mitchell, the victim's mother-in-law. Also, check her phone for hidden communication apps." "Will do, detective, but it could take some time. Work fast, it's a priority." While the techs worked on the computer and the phone, Sandra returned to Amelia's diary. She reread the entries carefully, writing out key phrases. "Today is 3 years since V kissed me for the first time. I still remember how scared I was then, and how I couldn't think about anything else afterward. Jay suspects nothing. Sometimes I feel sorry for him. He's a good man and deserves honesty, but the truth will kill him. V said today that we can't go on like this anymore, that it wasn't right, but then we ended up in bed again. We both know we can't stop." The last entry was dated the day before yesterday. "T suspects something. He looked at me strangely today when I came back from shopping with W. I'm scared. What if he finds out the truth?" Sandra leaned back in her chair. The picture was becoming clearer and clearer. V was almost certainly Vivian Mitchell. And T, Thomas. It seemed Amelia was having an affair with her mother-in-law, and Thomas was beginning to suspect something. Sandra's phone rang. It was a technician from the digital department. "Detective Colette? You need to see this." We cracked Amelia Mitchell's email password and found a hidden folder of correspondence. "I'm on my way." In the digital department, a tech showed Sandra a computer screen. Look, she had a secret email account that she only used to communicate with one person, Vivian Mitchell. The correspondence goes back over 3 years, and it's, well, quite frank. Sandra began to look through the letters. They left no doubt. There had been a romantic and sexual relationship between Amelia and Vivian that had started before Amelia had even married John. "My dear V," Amelia wrote in one of the letters, "I know that our relationship would be considered unacceptable by many. You and I would be in the eyes of society and criminals and perverts, but I cannot deny my feelings. When I marry Jay, remember it's just a cover. My heart belongs only to you." In response, Vivian wrote, "Amelia, my love, I never thought I could experience such passion at my age. You have turned my whole life upside down. Sometimes I'm afraid that T will suspect something. He's been so attentive lately. But then I think, who cares? I don't care if the whole world collapses as long as we're together." The letters became more and more candid, describing meetings when the men went to work, secret weekends spent together under the pretext of shopping or spas, plans for the future. "There are more photos," the technician said, pointing to a folder. "Quite intimate." Sandra opened the folder and quickly looked through the contents. There was no doubt about it. Amelia and Vivian were in a long-term love relationship. "One more thing," the technician added. In one of the last letters, Amelia wrote that she suspected that Thomas had installed a surveillance camera in the house. "Here, look." He opened the letter, dated last week. "V, honey, I think T knows something. Yesterday, I noticed a strange box in the corner of the living room. Looks like a mini camera. I didn't touch it so as not to arouse suspicion. But we need to be more careful. Maybe we should stop seeing each other in the house for a while." Sandra remembered that there was no mention of the camera in the original crime scene survey. "Print out all this correspondence for me," she ordered the technician. "And check the phone for any correspondence with Vivian Mitchell via messengers." "Already checked," the technician replied. "It's clean, just the usual family conversations. Apparently, they only communicated through this secret mailbox." Sandra took the printouts and returned to her office. Now she had a theory that explained everything. Thomas had somehow found out about his wife's affair with their sister-in-law, probably actually set up a hidden camera, saw something that confirmed his suspicions, and in a rage, killed Amelia. But if the camera existed, where is it now? Thomas could have gotten rid of it after the murder. Or Sandra grabbed her phone and called the officer left at the Mitchell house for surveillance. "Parker? Colette, is Vivian Mitchell still home?" "Yes, detective. She's in her bedroom, said she wasn't feeling well. Listen to me carefully. Keep an eye on her. I suspect she may be trying to destroy evidence. Especially look for a small camera that may have been hidden in the living room, and check for any hidden safes or hiding places in the house." "Got it, detective." Sandra hung up the phone and thought. She needed to question Thomas again, now that she had concrete evidence. But first, she decided to go through the crime scene photos again, looking for signs of the camera Amelia had written about. One of the pictures of the living room, taken from an angle, showed a small black object that looked like a charger in the corner of the room. It could have easily gone unnoticed on the initial inspection, especially if no one was specifically looking for the camera. Sandra's phone rang again. It was Officer Parker. "Detective, you're not going to believe this!" "I found the camera hidden in a decorative vase in the living room, and Vivian Mitchell was trying to get something out of the safe in Thomas's office. When I came in, she quickly closed it and said she was looking for some documents. Don't let her touch anything, I'm on my way out." On the way to the Mitchell's house, Sandra reflected on all the facts she had received. The picture of the crime was now quite clear. Thomas, suspecting something was amiss, had installed a surveillance camera. When he saw the footage of his wife cheating with their daughter-in-law, he returned home in the middle of the workday and found Amelia alone. A confrontation probably ensued, during which he shot her. But what did he plan to do with the tape? And why refuse to talk about motive? Arriving at the house, Sandra found Vivian in the living room. The woman looked tense and frightened. "Mrs. Mitchell," Sandra began, "I know about your relationship with Amelia." Vivian flinched, but remained silent. "We found your correspondence in her mail, and the camera your husband installed. I think he saw you and Amelia together, and that's why he killed her." Vivian lowered her head and covered her face with her hands. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." Sandra sat down across from her. 3 years of a secret relationship with her sister-in-law. How did it start? Vivian looked up, her eyes filled with tears. I never thought it was possible. I was 45 when John brought her into our home. She was so alive, so free. Not at all like me at her age. We became friends, spent a lot of time together, and then she stopped, trying to find the words. It just happened. We were sitting in my room one night talking, and suddenly she kissed me. I should have pushed her away, told her it was wrong. But I couldn't. And you continued dating even after she married your son? Yes, Vivian answered quietly. I know it's terrible. We were cheating on both of them, Thomas and John. But I couldn't stop. It was like a drug. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alive. When did Thomas find out? I didn't know he'd set up the camera. Amelia suspected something, but I didn't believe it. I thought she was just being paranoid. And the day before yesterday, when Thomas came home from work, he was strange. Silent. He looked at me like he could see right through me. I was frightened, but I didn't let on. And yesterday? Yesterday, he was supposed to be at work all day. He had an important meeting. I don't know why he came home. Amelia was supposed to be at the gallery too, but she called and said she wasn't feeling well and would come home. We were planning to spend some time together. But Thomas came home early? Yes. I was upstairs when I heard his car. I was afraid he'd catch us together, so I hid in my room. Then I heard screaming and then a gunshot. Vivian shuddered. When I came downstairs, Amelia was already lying on the floor and Thomas was sitting in a chair with a gun. What did he say to you? He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with this look of, contempt. Then the neighbors came, the police. He didn't say a word about what he saw or knew. Sandra watched Vivian carefully. The story sounded plausible, but something about it didn't add up. Mrs. Mitchell, why does your husband refuse to talk about the motive for the murder? If he knew about your infidelity, why doesn't he use that as a mitigating circumstance? Vivian looked away. I don't know. Maybe he wants to protect John. He doesn't want his son to know the truth about his mother and wife. Maybe, Sandra agreed. But there's another explanation. He could have seen something else on the tape. Something you're not telling me. Vivian turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Officer Parker reported that you tried to open the safe in your husband's office. What were you looking for in there? Nothing much. Just some papers. Don't lie to me, Mrs. Mitchell. You were looking for the security tape, weren't you? You wanted to destroy the evidence. Vivian remained silent, clenching her fists. Sandra decided to change tactics. You know, I'm going to go down to the station and question your husband again. Show him the printouts of your correspondence with Amelia. Maybe then he'll decide to tell the truth. The whole truth. No! Vivian exclaimed. Please don't. John can't know. No one can know. Know what? Vivian covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I didn't mean to. I loved her. But she wanted to tell John everything, to leave him. Said she couldn't live a lie anymore. That's what we fought about. Sandra leaned closer. What happened yesterday, Vivian? What did Thomas see on the tape? Vivian lifted her crying face. He saw me. At that moment, Officer Parker entered the room, holding a small device. Detective, I found the memory card from the camera. It was hidden in a book in the study. Sandra took the memory card, feeling that she held the key to the mystery. Now she had to find out what had really happened in the Mitchell house, and why Thomas had decided to kill Amelia, and not the cheating wife, when he learned of the affair between his wife and daughter-in-law. Sandra inserted the memory card into the computer at the police station. Vivian Mitchell sat beside her, her face pale, her hands trembling. After discovering the memory card, she agreed to come voluntarily to the station to testify. I need to know the truth, Mrs. Mitchell, Sandra said as she waited for the computer to recognize the device. The full truth about your relationship with Amelia and what happened on the day of the murder. Vivian swallowed, clasping her hands together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I've already told you about our relationship. We were in love. It started 3 years ago before Amelia married John. But your son didn't know anything? No. Vivian shook her head. John had always been traditional, and so was Thomas. They would never understand. We hid our relationship. And yet Amelia married your son knowing she loved you? Vivian lowered her eyes. It was my idea. I was afraid of losing her, afraid of a scandal if our relationship was exposed. I thought that if she became part of the family, we could be together. No one would suspect. She grinned bitterly. Sounds awful, doesn't it? I used my son as a cover for our relationship. And Amelia agreed to that. At first, yes. She loved me and would do anything to keep us together. She liked John, even though she didn't love him the way he loved her. She thought she could be a good wife to him in spite of our relationship. But then something changed? Yes, Vivian answered quietly. For the last few months, Amelia had been saying more and more often that she was tired of living a lie, that she wanted to be free, wanted us to be together openly. She insisted that we should tell John and Thomas everything, get a divorce, and start a new life. And you didn't want to do that? I was afraid, Vivian admitted, her eyes filling with tears. I was afraid of losing my son, my home, my position in society. Thomas would never forgive such a betrayal. I asked Amelia to be patient, to wait. Maybe in a few years, when John meets someone else. The computer beeped, signaling that the memory card was ready for viewing. Sandra opened the folder and saw several video files dated within the last 2 weeks. So your husband really did install a surveillance camera? Apparently so. Vivian looked frightened. I didn't know about it until Amelia suspected something, but I didn't believe her. I thought she was just being hypocritical. Sandra started going through the files. Most of them showed an empty living room or the usual everyday scenes. Vivian cleaning the room, John rushing to work, Amelia reading a book on the couch. But the last file, dated the day of the murder, caught her attention. This is what happened yesterday, she said, opening the video. The footage showed the living room of the Mitchell house. The time in the corner of the screen showed the beginning of the third day. Vivian and Amelia were sitting on the couch, close together. They were talking, but the camera didn't record the sound. It was clear from their gestures that the conversation was tense. Amelia was hotly arguing something. Vivian was shaking her head, looking frustrated. Then Amelia took Vivian's hands in hers, looked her in the eyes and said something. After that, they hugged and then kissed. The recording continued. The kisses became more and more passionate. They began to undress, caressing each other. Sandra fast-forwarded through this part, feeling awkward. Then she was back to normal speed when she noticed movement at the front door. Thomas Mitchell walked into the room. He froze on the threshold, looking at the naked women on the couch who didn't notice him, absorbed in each other. His face changed, first shock, then pain, and then cold fury. He silently turned and left the room. The recording continued for a few more minutes. Then Amelia and Vivian, still unaware that they had been caught, ended their meeting. Amelia got up, started to get dressed. Vivian said something to her, and Amelia leaned over to kiss her again. She then headed toward the exit of the room, at which point Thomas reappeared in the frame, now with a gun in his hand. A brief conversation ensued. Then Thomas raised the gun and fired. Amelia fell to the floor. Thomas walked over to her, checked her pulse, and then sat down in a chair, placing the gun on a table nearby. A few minutes later, Vivian came running into the room, already fully dressed. She screamed when she saw Amelia's body, rushed over to her, then turned to Thomas. He said something to her and she froze, looking at him with a mixture of horror and understanding. Sandra turned off the tape and turned to Vivian. What did he say to you? After you came downstairs and saw what had happened? Vivian wiped the tears rolling down her cheeks. He said, I saw everything. Everything. You have no idea how lucky you are that it wasn't you lying there. Why did he kill Amelia and not you? Sandra asked. You're his wife, the mother of his son. It would have been more logical. I don't think he could, Vivian answered quietly. Despite everything I did, he loved me for 26 years. And Amelia, she was just a daughter-in-law to him who betrayed his son and destroyed his family. Sandra nodded, understanding this twisted logic. You lied to me by telling me you were upstairs at the time of the murder. Yes, Vivian admitted. I was in my room when I heard the shot, but I didn't know that Thomas had come home and seen me and Amelia together. I don't know what I thought. When I came downstairs and saw Amelia dead and Thomas with a gun, I was shocked. And then when he said he saw everything, I realized that he knew about us, and that he could have killed me too. Why didn't you tell the police the truth right away? Vivian grinned bitterly. What difference would it have made? Amelia is still dead. Thomas is still a murderer, and I didn't want John to know the truth. He'd already lost his wife. I didn't want him to lose faith in her and in me. But now the truth will come out anyway, Sandra pointed out. This tape will be evidence in court. I know, Vivian lowered her head. I'll have to live with the consequences of my decisions. Sandra stood up. Mrs. Mitchell, you're going to have to testify officially. Everything you've told me and everything we saw on the tape. I understand, Vivian replied quietly. After Vivian's statement was recorded, Sandra went to the cell where Thomas Mitchell was being held. The man looked gaunt and aged, but there was determination in his gaze. Minus Mr. Mitchell, Sandra began, sitting down across from him. We found the surveillance tape you installed in your house. Now we know what really happened. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. So now everything will come out. Why didn't you tell me about this right away? It might have mitigated your sentence. Murder in a state of passion, provoked by the discovery of adultery. I didn't want John to know, Thomas answered quietly. My son. He adored his wife and he loved his mother. I wanted to protect him from the truth. Even at the cost of a harsher sentence for yourself? Even at the cost of that, Thomas nodded. But now that you've found the tape, he sighed. It doesn't matter now. Tell me what happened that day, in your own words. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his gaze absent, as if he were staring into the past. I began to suspect something months ago. Vivian had changed. Distant, absent-minded. She would often leave the house, saying she was going shopping or meeting friends, but would return without shopping and never mention what she had talked about with those friends. I noticed the way she looked at Amelia, with a special look, and the way Amelia returned it. He was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. At first, I dismissed the thought. I thought it was just paranoia, the jealousy of an aging man. But the suspicion didn't go away. 2 weeks ago, I installed a camera in the living room. I just wanted to see if I was wrong. I wanted to prove to myself that I was imagining things. But you weren't wrong, Sandra said quietly. No. Thomas shook his head. For the first few days, I didn't see anything unusual. But then I noticed how they sat too close together when they thought no one could see them. How their hands accidentally touch and they don't pull them away. Little things that could have been explained by normal friendship, if it weren't for the looks they exchanged. And you decided to come home early yesterday? I had an important appointment with a client, but he canceled at the last minute. I decided to go home to have lunch and go over the paperwork for another meeting. I didn't expect to find Amelia there. She was supposed to be at the gallery, and I certainly didn't expect to see what I saw. His voice trembled, but he quickly pulled himself together. I walked into the house and heard sounds coming from the living room. Opened the door and saw them together, my wife and my son's wife, on our couch, in our house. They didn't notice me, they were too, preoccupied with each other. Thomas clenched his fists so white his knuckles turned white. I don't know what happened to me in that moment. It was like being stabbed in the heart. 26 years of marriage, the family I'd spent my whole life building, it was all a lie. I couldn't bear to see it. I walked out without a word. Went up to my office. Sat there for I don't know how long, trying to comprehend what I'd just seen. And then I heard Amelia coming down the stairs. Vivian must have stayed upstairs. I took the gun from the safe and went downstairs. Amelia was in the living room getting ready to leave. I asked her how long this had been going on. She pretended at first that she didn't know what I meant. But when I told her I'd seen them together, she didn't deny it. She said they'd been in love for 3 years, that Vivian was unhappy with me, that they were planning to leave together, taking John away from me. Did she really say that? That they'd take your son? Not literally, Thomas admitted, but she said that John deserved to know the truth, that they were going to tell him everything, and he would decide who he wanted to be with. She was so sure he'd take their side. That was the last straw. I fired a shot. Sandra nodded, taking notes. And then? Then I checked to see if she was alive. She was dead. I sat back in my chair and put the gun down. I wasn't going to run or deny that I had done it. A few minutes later, Vivian came running in. She was screaming, crying over Amelia's body. Asked me what I'd done. I told her I'd seen them together, that I knew they were connected. She stopped talking and stepped away from me, like she was afraid I'd shoot her too. Have you thought about it? About killing your wife too? Thomas was silent for a long moment, then shook his head. Lie-en. In spite of everything she'd done, I still loved her. And Amelia. She was a stranger who came into our family and destroyed it. I understand, Sandra said. Well, Mr. Mitchell, you will be charged with murder. Your testimony that you caught your wife with your sister-in-law may be considered mitigating circumstances, but that's for the court to decide. I don't care, Thomas replied quietly. My life is already ruined. As Sandra left the interrogation room, she ran into John Mitchell, who was waiting in the hallway. Detective Collette, he began, I want to know what's going on. Why is my mother here? What have you discovered? Sandra sighed. The moment she dreaded had come. To tell this man the truth that would shatter all his ideas about family. Minus Mr. Mitchell, I think we'd better talk in my office. They went into a small room and Sandra motioned for John to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, she began. But you deserve to know the truth. John nodded tensely, his eyes red from sleep deprivation and tears. I'm ready. I want to know why my father killed Amelia. Sandra took a deep breath and began to tell. About the fact that they had discovered secret correspondence between Amelia and Vivian. About the fact that the relationship had been going on for 3 years, having started before John and Amelia were even married. About the surveillance camera Thomas had installed and what he had seen on it on the day of the murder. John listened without interrupting. As the story progressed, his face changed. Shock, disbelief, hurt, anger alternating with each other. It can't be true, he finally whispered when Sandra had finished. Amelia loved me. I know that. I'm sorry, Sandra said quietly. But we have proof. The letters, Amelia's diary, the videotape. I want to see it, John said sharply. I have to see the tape with my own eyes. Sandra hesitated. Showing him the tape of his mother and wife making love, and then his father killing Amelia was cruel. But she understood his need to see the evidence with his own eyes. All right, she finally agreed. But I warn you, this is going to be hard. She turned on the tape, delicately skipping over the most intimate moments. John watched stone-faced, but when it came to the moment of the murder, he turned away. That's enough, he said hoarsely. I've seen enough. Sandra turned off the tape and waited silently, giving him time to realize what he had seen. My whole life has been a lie, John finally said. My marriage, my family. All 3 of the people closest to me betrayed me. My father killed my wife. My wife cheated on me with my own mother. And my mother. He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm sorry, Sandra repeated, feeling how meaningless these words were in the face of such tragedy. What will happen now? John asked after a long silence. Your father will stand trial for murder. His lawyer will probably argue for a reduced sentence because of the circumstances under which the murder took place. Your mother is on the stand as a witness. And me? John asked bitterly. What am I supposed to do now? Sandra had no answer to that question. The trial of Thomas Mitchell began 3 months later and attracted enormous media attention. The story of a love triangle in a respectable family that ended in murder became a sensation. John Mitchell did not appear in court, avoiding publicity and the attention of journalists. Thomas pleaded guilty, but his lawyer insisted that the murder occurred in a state of passion, caused by the shock of discovering his wife's adultery. The prosecutor, on the other hand, argued that enough time had elapsed between the discovery of the affair and the murder for Thomas to cool down and think about his actions, meaning the killing was premeditated. Key witnesses for the prosecution were Vivian Mitchell and Detective Sandra Collette. Vivian, pale and gaunt, testified in a shaky voice. She admitted her affair with Amelia, how they had deceived Thomas and John, and how Thomas had discovered them together on the day of the murder. Did you plan to tell your son about your relationship with his wife? the prosecutor asked. Amelia wanted to, Vivian replied quietly. She said she was tired of living a lie. But I was afraid. Afraid of losing my son. Afraid of the scandal. I told her to wait. And that's what you discussed on the day of the murder? Yes, Vivian nodded. Amelia insisted it was time to tell John. We, fought about it, and then she couldn't continue. Sandra's testimony was more restrained and professional. She recounted the investigation, the evidence found, and Thomas's confession after the security camera footage was found. The videotape was shown to the jury behind closed doors, with no public or press present. The reaction of the jurors was evident on their faces when they returned to the courtroom, a mixture of shock, disgust, and sympathy. Thomas himself held himself calmly and with dignity. When he was given the last word, he rose and addressed the court. I'm not asking for leniency or trying to justify what I did. I killed a man, and for that, I must be punished. But I want everyone to understand that at that moment I was defending not only my honor, but the honor of my son, my home, my family. Everything I had believed in and built my whole life was destroyed by the betrayal of the two women closest to me. I'm not proud of what I did, but I don't repent of it. The jury deliberated briefly. The verdict was guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Thomas Mitchell to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. After the trial was over, Sandra met Vivian outside the courthouse. What are you going to do now? The detective asked. Vivian looked lost and devastated. I don't know. John won't talk to me. He sold his stake in his father's company and left town. Didn't say where. The house is for sale. I have nothing left. I'm sorry about that, Sandra said sincerely. Vivian grinned bitterly. I'm sorry too, but it's my own fault for everything that happened. If I hadn't given in to my feelings for Amelia, if I hadn't insisted on her marriage to John, if I'd had the courage to be honest. She didn't finish the sentence, turning away to hide her tears. Goodbye, Detective Collette, she said as she left. Thank you for being good to me no matter what. Sandra watched Vivian Mitchell walk away, hunched under the weight of her guilt and loss. The story of this family was a tragedy created by secrets, lies, and fear of being herself. A love that could have brought happiness turned to destruction and death because it was hidden in the shadows. A week after the trial ended, Sandra received a letter from John Mitchell. It was a short message, just a few lines. Detective Collette, thank you for revealing the truth, however painful it may be. I'm starting a new life in a different city, under a different name. I hope one day to forget everything that happened, even though I know it's impossible. Goodbye. There was no signature, nor was there a return address. John Mitchell disappeared, trying to put his family's tragedy behind him. Thomas Mitchell served his sentence in state prison, maintaining the silent dignity of a man who had lost everything he believed in. And Vivian Mitchell was rumored to have moved to a small town on the coast, where she lived a lonely and withdrawn life, punishing herself for her mistakes more than any court could. 3 lives ruined by a secret that eventually came out anyway. Sandra often thought about the Mitchell family, wondering if things might have turned out differently if they had found the courage to be honest with each other. If society had been more accepting. If love could have existed in the light instead of hiding in the shadows. But history had already been written, and there was no way to rewrite it. All that was left was to learn the lessons and move on, hoping that other stories would end differently.